All right, we're back with Delial versus Akiyama. I'm pretty fuzzy today, so bear with me. What do we got here? They both have gone with the 9 9s. Akiyama has gone full 6 7 6. I feel, you know, supported in my ways. While Deli has gone for 3 5 7 6. Again, Deli has made sure to have a 7 on both his low levels. I quite like that. I think that's a strong decision. While Akiyama has gone with a little more dynamic. 2 5 8, same plus wall, no plus, right? Last time I sent Dully messages, no plus throughout the game. He definitely didn't need them, but sometimes you will. I'm gonna go send one no plus message just for old time's sake. Old times meaning a week ago. I still don't like first turn on this set. There's something about the plus missing. It's just hard to get moves to click. I think Akiyama last time played a very reasonable kind of low level starter, and Delial was able to attack it immediately for some advantage. And I think that's likely to occur again, but it does not. Akiyama says, I see safety, I'm going to take safety. And note, if there's no plus walls against this immediately, there's never going to be a setup against it, right? Um, there's only gonna it's gonna be safe. This card is safe. This card has been played. This card's on the board. Now Akiyama lacks a level 8, but Deli needs something to do. And it's quite possible the level 5s are strong enough this isn't a major cost. Like my instinct is always to my instinct is to hold on to level 8s, but the level 8 is not a sweeper, right? The level 8 automatically wins in basically two directions. Not necessarily given the opponent level 8, but in general, it automatically wins in two directions. But it kind of never wins in any other direction. So I'm looking at 1732 in 1. But Akiyama can probably take that pretty comfortably with 6763, and that's a bulky card that's going to be hard to do much against. Hmm. Sorry, yawning. Um, I think this is a good starter. I would not be comfortable right now with Deli. I think the 6763s are just really bulky and difficult to touch in a quite annoying way. Huh. Yeah, the sevens are well covered. The 6763s are going to be very powerful throughout this game. And you got to find something to do with the low level cards. One, no, that's not very good. Hmm. My instinct right now is 1732 and 3. And I'm having trouble quite saying why I think this is reasonable. 1373 and 3 is similar. I think something in 3. If you can, you're going to follow up, I think, with 6367 and 6. That card I just don't feel is going to play that well this game, and if you can grab safety with it and keep your 9 9 up, I think you're in a pretty decent spot. Maybe not. Maybe the L's are bad for you. They can, but maybe that's why 1373 and 3. 1373 and 3, so that 6367 cannot land in 2 to set up an L with the threat of a same in 5. So 1373 and 3. If they go 6367 and 6, you can play 1732 in 2, and you have a threat in 5, and you've drawn a reasonable card out of their hand. You've used your low levels. It's still hard to land your remaining cards, but it's helpful that 6367 can recapture 2 from 1. I think that might be a path to comfort. I think in these situations, what you really want is kind of something that gives clear plans that should hold, right? Because I think this is a tough spot, but I think I was talking about sort of the professional way to tie earlier. Um, and in that game, my line that I called the professional way to tie did work and I think was good. My tie next turn did not work and was not good, and Deli found the only tie, and it was just fantastic defense. But when I say professional, I don't mean like higher level. I mean like the kind of person that's like doing this day in and day out and not going to spend too much effort on one game, right? Is going to find ways to like shortcut the difficulty of the game. And I think here I'm looking for shortcuts to difficulty. I'm not saying this well. I'm not awake. It's at an hour I definitely should be awake, but I'm not awake. I haven't that it's not important. Um so I think 1373 and 3 is oddly reasonable. I also noticed that it's genuinely not trivial for Akiyama to take that from 2, right? You have a real threat to go in 6. 1454 can be comboed by 1732 and 1 if 1454 lands in 2. And if 6763 lands in 2, that just stopped covering all those 7s on the right side, and suddenly 3576 can land in 1 if wanted. Alright, he goes for the option in 1, which was my first instinct. I ended up liking 3 a little more, but that doesn't mean I was right. I thought the captures here were just too bulky. So I think the critical line is Akiyama plays 6763 in 4. And importantly, that keeps 7 covered, right? Your only capture in 7 is plus walls by 6367. So you're presumably intending to play 3576 and 2. There's not too much else there. And then Akiyama then, I was assuming, would go 6367 and 3. Now he's left with absolutely horrible cards. His cards left are probably too horrible there. Yeah, I didn't realize his cards left were quite that dead. I thought, like, even though you have some uses for 9934, it's only one use, but one use is enough to get it to 5-5, and you still have 6367 in your hand. Okay, that's not that promising for Akiyama. But he could take other ways too. For instance, if he takes with 7-2-4-1, he keeps more powerful cards in his hand. Note he also has 1-4-5-4 for 2 if he wants it. And that might actually be the better way to take, right? Usually the better way to take is the weak side because the opponent has very limited tools to recapture from the strong side, and you can come up with a forcing line against that specific card. But actually, here, if you play 1-4-5-4 and 2, Deli's only recaptures from 4 are with his 2 arguably most powerful cards. And he also doesn't have a way to use a 7 down and 3, you have that well covered. So both 2 and 4 are really tempting. You can also go like 6, 8, 5, 3, 7. I mean, every square is plausible. But I think this is a card Deli can't retake that happily. And you can put some pressure on that. On the other hand, leaving it alone makes some sense too. You're not going to have a card that's good for both squares, so you can't leave it alone forever. You can't be like, yes, 6763 lands so well in 4, I'll just save that because it doesn't land well in 2. So you do want to interact with it like before the absolute endgame. You have turns 3, 5, 7, and 9. You can interact with it any of 3, 5, or 7, but my instinct is to do so earlier. Not sure how to quite explain why that is. You can also play some. No, you can't. Looking for other ideas. I think in general, 6 and 8 are not doing that much here. And you don't really have cards that land there all that cleanly. Maybe 7, 2, 4, 1, and 6? Nah, that's not doing much. Okay. So, that's okay. Yeah, 7, 2, 4, 1, and 6 might be seen. Akiyama, very much. Okay, did not predict this at all. I was about to say, and now this will look so incorrect, that note there's no plus on, so there's nothing in 8. Um, Akiyama, in structures with cards in 1 and 9, has um, for especially on first turn, but for both turns, I believe has a clearly lower win rate in like chat tournaments and stuff than he does in other structures. I'm not at all convinced this is an actual weakness. I think the sample is really small. But when I was grabbing some data on some players, one thing that popped was his results were worse in opposite corner positions. And another thing that popped, and this is very similar to my instincts, and my results in opposite corners are not great, but like pretty good. Like not like worse than my other stuff. I don't think. I don't remember that well. For some reason, I remember his better. I guess it matters more to me like what other people's weaknesses are, but it shouldn't. I should be focused on like fixing my own. Anyway, both our instincts are to immediately play next to one of the corners, and his instinct historically has been to capture those corners very quickly. That he really plays in 2 or 4, a very high rate out of opposite corners compared to the other high end players. So it's interesting to see him going in 5 here. I think part of why he's doing so is just because 9 is so untouchable, but he is giving up a very powerful card in his hand. He is giving up a very powerful card. So now 3, 5, 7, 6, and 2 makes more sense to me. But 6, 3, 6, 7 is going to dominate a lot of parts of the board. That cannot be contested. And 1, 4, 5, 4, and 7, 2, 4, 1 are good at picking off 7s. All of Deli's 7s are lining up poorly this game, I think, basically. Right? 1, 3, 7, 3 is not only not safe in 4, but it can be captured by something fairly weak in a way that's perhaps a little annoying. Deli wants to get 6 off the board. I think like you think of like Deli goes in 2 or Deli goes in 4, Akiyama goes in the other. Maybe 5 doesn't always flip. Maybe you can take 5 off the board. If 5 is yours, you want 6. If 5 is yours, you want them to have to play in 6. No one has 6. If 5 isn't yours, you want 6 occupied early because 6 is a dead square for you. Okay. Well, I found some ways to lose. 3, 5, 7, 6, 2 is still my instinct. They cannot immediately take it with 6, 3, 6, 7, and 3 because you have a same and 6. Akiyama's 6, 3, 6, 7 is better than Deli's because he has first turn, so he has last turn, so it's more likely to sweep the right side. But it also means that Akiyama's can't land at this moment. However, Akiyama's is guaranteed to get a capture over on the right, so as long as, and like go plus on the right. So as long as he's not like horribly behind there, he can't lose. So for instance, if something like 3, 5, 7, 6, and 2, 7, 2, 4, 1 in 4, making it 5, 5, uh, hmm, 6, 3, 6, 7, and 7, making it 6, 4, 1, 4, 5, 4, and 8, no plus, making it 5, 5, Akiyama wins because 6, 3, 6, 7 sweeps the endgame and there's no more captures for Deli. So if 2, then 4, it's kind of uncomfortable. Yeah. But maybe you hold there. Maybe so you go 3-5-7-6 and 2. Akiyama plays 7-2-4-1 in 4. You play 1-3-7-3 in 3. It's 5-5. They didn't flip 5. It's 5-5. If they play the obvious 6-3-6-7 and 6, that only flips 3, not 5. You're up 6. They're up 6-4, and you can play 9-9-3-4 in 7. And even though there's 3 cards, 5, 7, and 9, that their 1-4-5-4 interacts with, there's no plus, and they don't have any captures at the end. So I think there are ties here, but I think they're all like narrow, uncomfortable paths. I'd also be looking at 4. I'm not entirely sure which card in 4, but something like 6-3, 6-7, 4 seems possible to me. But 6-3, 6-7 is really going to sweep on the right. And it's hard because 6-3, 6-7 your own, you don't have a good way to block 6. It's hard to get rid of 3 and 6. It's hard to get rid of 3 and 6. And something like 1-3-7-3 and 3 makes 6-3, 6-7 even more powerful. So I think this was a really nice try from Akiyama. It looks risky, but his low-level cards actually play really well. One thing I've said about Akiyama is he has a really good feel for which cards will play well, and thus he's one of the players least affected by having high or low-level cards. He can have high or low-level cards remaining, and that means so much less than it does with other players. If you're playing me and you get me to use all my high levels early, I am almost certainly in trouble and playing badly. But if you get Akiyama too, it just doesn't mean that much. It's really impressive. So I think Deli should be able to navigate to a tie here, but I think it's one of those positions where all the ties are kind of vague and it is very, very easy to go wrong. He blocks 6. Really interesting instinct. Really interesting instinct. So if 1-4-5-4 goes in 3, just looking at like obvious captures, Deli wants. Incidentally, if this move holds, I love this move, right? This move is saying there's a square that's consistently a problem that I never have play in, and I'm going to remove it while getting as much value as I can, while putting something out that's difficult to take, that's clunky to take. Only 1-4-5-4 can take it, and if you play that, then my 3-5-7-6 lands much better in 2. So you went up 6-4, but I have a double capture. I go up 6-4. You only have single captures at that point. For instance, if you play 7-2-4-1 or 6-3-6-7 in 4, your other card does not dominate to the right. So if you take this, Deli should hold a tie unless I'm missing something real obvious, but it's hard to miss something that obvious because there's no plus, right? And so things don't sweep. Okay, so I think this holds against 3. Yeah, and this was the kind of move I was trying to get to, but wasn't quite there. The other question is, does it hold against 4? But which card goes in 4? Probably 7-2-4-1. Probably 7-2-4-1 goes in 4. Now, your only capture is 9-9-3-4, and you can't really play 9-9-3-4, right? Ooh, one thing to notice is 5 is Akiyama's. 3-5-7-6 doesn't plus, but it does plus wall. So, okay, if Akiyama goes in 4, I think he actually might just be destroyed or be in serious trouble. Like, say Deli goes 1-3-7-3 and 8. I don't think this is best, but like, say he goes 1-3-7-3 and 8. Akiyama goes 7. Deli plays 3-5-7-6 and 2. That pluses through 5 to recapture 8 if needed, and to flip 4 and to flip 1. So I think actually 7-2-4-1 can't really go in 4. Of course, there's also 8. We haven't thought about 8. There's a lot of moves here. Very dangerous position. It should also be noted Deli now 3-5-7-6. If it lands in 3 is safe. But I think it landing in 2 is powerful enough because, again, no plus, so it's not comboed back. I think this held, and I think this was. I'm not entirely sure if the moves I was looking at were going to hold. My guess is yes, but I don't know. I like this move more than the moves I was looking at. Um, I liked going in 3 more than Deli's move in 1, but I like 6 a lot. And 6 kind of deals with the things I was having trouble dealing with because I kept getting swept by 6-3, 6-7 on the right. And the question is, can I mitigate the damage enough of that sweeping? And I was sort of saying at the end, like, it would be great if we could get rid of those squares. And I don't think I got to, but I don't think there was anything in 3. I did mention 1-3, 7-3, and 3 just sets up 6-3, 6-7 to be even more dominant. But I didn't really get to this because I figured it was the cost of chucking a card here was too high. But if 1-4-5-4 and 3 doesn't land that well, and it usually doesn't, this feels like the answer, the move that like I was talking about earlier, the professional thing, the move that kind of says, okay, there's all these complicated lines, but I'm going to address the problem and make a tie instead of trying to work around the problem. I'm just going to move it off the table as early as I can, right? I have 3 turns left in the game to deal with this problem, and the longer the problem lasts, which is generally true in Triple Triad, the longer like a combo stays on the board, the closer to endgame it is, the less time you have to kind of ameliorate the damage. So I really like moves like this, and it's not a square you instinctively look at because you kind of have to use a more powerful card there. It doesn't flip anything, it doesn't have these immediate goals. But if this holds, it's a great move. And I do think, yeah, as I was saying about Akiyama, I think his moves in 9 and 5, I might have ended up considering the move in 9 just because it is hard to start on this set, and that was a safe starter. And having a safe starter is really appealing. Oh, I do think Deli made a kind of major mistake this game. I do think there was a mistake, but I think it was not the necessarily obvious ones. Now, it may have been the obvious. It may be obvious to you. He's using either the same or a very similar hand that he used before. It's a open random, right? You gotta. It can come up closed here, and you don't want your opponent to be playing open when you're playing closed. On the other hand, Akiyama's hand, his cards seem pretty familiar too. So knowing that he'll have the behemoth pair is pretty good information. Now, he has picked up another 6-3-6-7. He is leaving himself with the low-level cards as endgame sweepers. So is it landing in 8? Maybe it's landing in 8. Notice also, Deli is actually getting Akiyama to think, which is an incredibly rare occurrence. So one of a few things is happening. Either Delial is the literally only player on the planet who can get Akiyama to use time. This is entirely possible. Or this kind of position is so close to that dividing line between winning and tying that he's just trying to check everything he possibly can. And that is causing him to use more time because he's really trying to find that win. All right, 6-3, 6-7 in 8. Now the score is 5-5. Which means it's pretty easy to see the game now ending quickly, right? Something like 3-5, 7-6, and 3. And by ending quickly, I don't mean like, obviously there's only 4 moves left. The game always has the same number of moves left at like move 5. But I mean like, it's just a clear draw at this point, is my guess. So if 3-5, 7-6, and 3, 1-4-5-4 in 2, Akiyama is up 6-4. Deli plays 9-9-3-4 and 4, no plus. That puts him up 6-4, and Akiyama plays in 7, tying at 5-5. If Deli goes in 2 and 3 and Akiyama plays the other card in 2, he just loses. That would be silly. If Akiyama plays in 4, Deli can play in 2. Akiyama loses. That's just silly. And if Akiyama plays in 7, if he plays with 7-2-4-1, he has no captures in 4, so he can't possibly do more than tie. And if he plays 1-4-5-4, he has no captures in 2. So 3 should tie. Deli has the tie in hand. The question is there more here? If you play 9, 9, 3, 4, and 7, yes, you walk into a combo in 4, and your combo back in 2 doesn't do very much, but you are safe at the end, so that should actually just tie. That should be fine. Yeah, I think that does tie. But, like, obviously that's not how you're going to actually humanly play. I do notice 3, 5, 7, 6 landing in 2 is safe. So if you could find some way to get a favorable thing going on the other side of the board, but you can't. 7, 2, 4, 1 is actually really, really powerful here. Oh, maybe. So, okay. 3, 5, 7, 6, and 2. You go up 6, 4. If they go in 3, which card are they putting in 3? If they play 7, 2, 4, 1, you go in 4, and 1, 4, 5, 4 is nothing in 7. If they play 1, 4, 5, 4, then you play 9, 9, 3, 4 in 7, you flip 8, and 7, 2, 4, 1 only has one capture at the end. So if you go 3, 5, 7, 6 in 2, I think that wins. I think Deli just has the win here. No, of course, 1, 4, 5, 4 has a capture. Duh, okay, I'm an idiot. Yeah, I forgot 1, 4, 5, 4 had a capture in 3. I was like, there's no plus, there's no same, how could it flip anything? But of course it has the plus wall. Okay, if it didn't have the plus wall, 2 would win, but of course it does have the plus wall, and I cannot count. So good for me, good for plus wall. Alright. In that case, I do not think there is a winning path here. If you could slide in 4 and then play 2, right, and combo back your card in 4 through 5, or if you could go in like 7, forcing something that's comboed through 5 into 4, but you can't quite force the right alignment to take advantage of that plus wall. So, a good game. I'm going to go check on the rice I was making because we have a habit of games happening right at the times I'm trying to eat. So I guess I'll pause the video and we'll come back. Apologies if we miss some moves here, but I think there won't be surprises in this endgame. You know what? I'll leave it on, and you can check the chapter titles below the video, and like skip to next moves or whatever, and I'll just come back at some point. All right. Enjoy the rest of the game. I think this has been an interesting one. I think this has been a great match. Blizzard Seto was a really good match. I really liked that one. But I think this has very obviously been both the most kind of back and forth, both players in danger, finding narrow paths, but also the best played match overall, which is not a surprise. I mean, these are two of the best players on the site, if not the two best players. And you'd expect a pretty good match, but I think we've definitely had one. I really like Deli's move in 6 here, and I like seeing Akiyama's handling of his low levels, such that he can get away with using his mid and high levels, and doesn't just lose for it. Remarkable skill. Well, I'm going to break up this video and not include these parts. Cool. Alright, we're back for another Akiyama first turn. Let's look at hands. Again, Deli's gone 7-7-4-2, where Akiyama has gone 7-7-4-1. I lean the 7-7-4-1 there. Deli's gone 6-5-6-5, where Akiyama's gone 6-6-3-3. I don't know what I think there. They've both gone 6-2-6-6, and I think I agree. I think the 6-6-6-2s have been better than the 6-6-6-3s. They've both gone a 7-6-4-3, and Akiyama has returned to a 6-6-3-2, while Deli has stuck with a 7-5-4-1. All in all, no idea. I think the bigger advantage than hands is it has been difficult to start on this rule set. Akiyama starts quickly. Ooh, that reminds me I should start putting the results in. So, we got a game. and it was a good game. Huge surprise with these two players. Imagine them playing a good game. All right, so we had Akiyama, Delial. Let's see if we can remember it without looking at the game. Akiyama started with 9-3-4-9 in 9. Deli played 1-7-3-2 in 1. Akiyama played a huge surprise, 6-7, 6-3, and 5. At least a huge surprise to me. Deli played 6-3, 6-7, and 6. And Akiyama played 6-3, 6-7, and 8 now that it was no longer a sweeper. At that point, I technically don't know how it ended, so I will go check the Discord, but I would guess that Deli played 1-3-7-3-7, Akiyama played 1-4-5-4-4, Deli played 3-5-7-6-2, and Akiyama had 7-2-4-1 in 3, and Deli's last card remaining was... what could it be? Oh, the 9-9-4-3, or 9-9-3-4. That's my guess. I will go check. In the meantime, you can start thinking about this starter here. Note that Deli cannot take that 6, and Akiyama can. So, first instinct for Deli, try to set up against that. How, though? How indeed. One way is 5-1-4-7 and 5, when 4-7-6-3 is quite a good card. So I think that would be an appealing option. Alright, I have to go do something. One moment. We will pause. Alright, one other move that comes to mind, and this might be a terrible idea, but one of the disadvantages of half-weak corners is you often find your hand not actually that well placed to attack it because you just used up some power in its direction. Not as significant as sometimes is happening with fully weak corners. But I do wonder if 7-7-4-2 and 8 has any point. It is safe. You can double set up against it, I suppose. 4-1-7-7 and 6. Yeah, it's probably not such a good idea. Okay, fair enough. I was thinking, if it can force Akiyama to go in 4, it's possible Akiyama runs out of leftward power, but he probably doesn't. Yeah, I don't love that. I was also thinking about, if you take from 8, force 3, 6, 6, 2, and 4, can you play in 1? But 4-1-7-7 is way too good there. So I'm drawn to the setups in 5. Now, normally I prefer setups in 1, but you have trouble doing so in a way that isn't shared. And 7-7-4-2 sets up a way that isn't shared, or is shared actually. But even if it wasn't shared, your opponent has 2, and more importantly, you don't. So if they go in 4, you don't have 2. So he does go 5. All right. I didn't see too many other appealing options here. I think one really important point is that if 4-7-6-3 does land in 4, if Akiyama tries to force the action by going in 8, with, for instance, 6-7-4-3, which seems a very natural move to me, it is safe. Deli has a choice between 6-5-6-5 and 4-7-6-3. I think he should choose 4-7-6-3. And then, if Akiyama plays 4-1-7-7 and 1, then 7-7-4-2 and 2 is safe. If Akiyama plays, I guess 6-2-6-6 isn't hit by much. I mean, you can take it, but you can't combo it. But you can combo 3-6-6-2, which is important, because 6-5-6-5 is still in your hand. And 6-7-4-3 you can both combo, and it fails to capture. So if Akiyama wants... And 6-7-4-3 is out of his hand in this line, of course. So Akiyama presumably plays 6-2-6-6 in 1. There's other squares, but that seems natural. Deli plays Chunky Boy, 6-5-6-5 in 2. And what's the score? 6-4 Deli? I feel like that should be 5-5. 6-4, 6-4, 5-5, 6-4. Oh yeah, it is 6-4. Deli has 2 cards in both rows. Okay. And then 3662 remaining in Akiyama's hand, even though 4177 is pretty great, is pretty garbage, and I don't think that can possibly win. I think you play 3662 and 9. Deli plays, say, 6266 and 6. Akiyama plays 4177 and 3. That flips 2, but it was 7-3. So I think 6-7-4-3 and 8 should tie. And it's played. And it seemed the natural move to me, but I don't. I think this is just going, okay, I played a starter, you played a reply. I don't have much. Let's take the no risk option. And now I'm going to eat a little food. So I'll be back shortly. I will remember to pause this time. Good for me. Oh, one other funky line is God, what was I looking at? 4763 and 4. 6266 and 1. 6565 and 2. 4177 and 3. And you can't play 6266 and 6 because it's comboed by 3662. You have to play 7742 to hold the tie. Not very important, but somewhat important. Yeah, somewhat important. That's all I ever aspire to in the things I say. But I think Deli should hold there without too much fuss. But 6-7-4-3 being safe in 8 means this is a very safe way for Akiyama to play, and it is almost certainly how I would play it. Because it's one of those moves you can calculate pretty directly to I cannot lose. And once you've reached I cannot lose, there's only one person left who can lose, and it's your opponent. And so it's often not the move that gives the best winning chances, right? Because there are other moves that give a lot more room for error type than this move. But it is a type that says, yeah, I don't think I'm going to create enough this game that it's worth the risk. And from my perspective, I am always just trying to minimize risk. Except when I make bad moves. Sometimes I'm trying to minimize risk with those. But like I remember in match with Deli, I tried to give him room to screw up and got myself in trouble. And it's not really a style that fits well with me these days, but it is fun to watch the players that will like look at a position like this where the opponent has multiple setups and go, no, I'm going to go for it. I think I can play this for a win. But I think Akiyama, yeah, makes the professional move, right? So Deli can choose between 6565 and 4763 and 4 here, but 6565 looks terrible because 3662 is given freedom. So I wonder what else he's considering here. He's been making strange moves in 3 a lot, or the equivalent of 3, just like something away from the action, leaving stuff open that he thinks is favorable. But obviously, I think, unless you have just massive combo play, Akiyama playing 6266 and 4 blocks in everything really well. So I think you have to play 4763 and 4. But I think 4763 and 4 is good enough. Maybe he sees a problem with No, you must be ahead there. I was thinking 3662 and 1 looks deranged but keeps sweepers. So like it walks into the combo with 6565 and 2, and you're just so far behind, but maybe 4177 and 6266 are good enough it doesn't matter at that point. But no, it still matters. So I would expect 4763 and 4. Okay, I guess there's an alternative in 7742 and 9. I hate it, but there is technically it's legal. Nah, that can't be good. All right. So I don't actually know what Deli's looking at here. Sometimes I can figure out what he'd be looking at while he scans for options, because someone talking about chess said there are 6 facets of chess strength. I'm not going to remember what all of them were. One is kind of concrete knowledge, and if we compared that to triple triad, that might be like it's not so much knowing the rules. Like we're assuming you know the rules. Okay, Deli does it again. I can't deal with this at the moment, so we'll come back to it. I don't understand this move at all. I think Akiyama blocks 4, and I have trouble imagining he's not winning. We didn't even set up a combo in 2 or 6. So maybe there was a real problem with 4, 7, 6, 3, and 4 that I missed. I'm actually very curious about that, so I'm gonna go pull up the solver. But my guess is the game's over now. So I'm going to continue with what I was saying in a sec after I check the other line with the solver. I'm not going to check if this line is winning. I want to be surprised. You know, if this holds or where the win is or whatever, I want to be surprised. But, all right, red hand. 6, 3, 3, 6. 6, 7, 4, 3. This is the blue hand for your view, but 6, 2, 6, 6, 4, 1, 7, 7. First turn is always the red hand in the particular iteration of the solver I'm using. Deli at 5, 1, 4, 7, 6, 5, 6, 5, 7, 7, 4, 2, 6, 2, 6, 6, 4, 7, 6, 3. And I want to find, was there a problem with 4, 7, 6, 3, and 4? Because Deli doesn't have combos through 5, so it's so hard for there to be compensation here. Okay, so 4, 7, 6, 3, and 4 does tie. Yeah, there's not a win here. 6, 2, 6, 6, and 1 was my main line. And then I wanted 6, 5, 6, 5, and 2, and that does tie. Okay, so 4, 7, 6, 3 was the tie. I wonder what he saw. Very confused. All right, but 6 facets of strength in chess. Concrete knowledge, which is stuff like knowing what kind of endgames are just automatically winning, knowing opening theory. There's not really an equivalent in triple triad. So for the most part, I think we should say concrete knowledge is not a big part of triple triad. Pattern recognition. Pattern recognition's a big plus. Seeing like which things combos go through, knowing your formations. I think that kind of stuff all falls under pattern recognition. And then there is logic. And I think logic is a huge part of triple triad of kind of, okay, there's both the thinking like if I block here, they have to go there, or if I don't block here, they have to take it, and then I can, you know, following these chains of thought, or stuff like, okay, this card's going to sweep this region of the board, so I should leave that open, that kind of thing. I think all falls under logic. Logic and pattern recognition are huge parts of triple triad. But another part he identifies is candidate moves. And kind of both the breadth and the ability to narrow the moves you check. So, for instance, in this position, I thought there was basically one candidate move, right? And if that move didn't work, and I correctly saw that it didn't work, I would look for another candidate move, but I was not seeing the potential for other candidate moves, right? I had very limited scope of candidate moves. Deli finds very clearly, I've talked about stylistic differences to him. Like, if you compare my play to Akiyama's, I think we're clearly finding somewhat different candidate moves. There's some overlap because we're both very strong. You know, we both play 8 here on move 3, but there's also some stuff where we just look at different moves and different concepts. Okay, we see different candidate moves. I think Deli and I actually have a pretty strong overlap in candidate moves, but he reliably sees significantly more options than I do. And that can be both blessing and curse for him, right? Because for me, there's some use to narrowing, some use to saying, I can check these moves and I can spend a bunch of time on each, and I'm not really going to check anything else. And that has some practical upside. And for Deli, it also means he can both play the moves I would play and play significantly more creative options. We saw a move somewhat like this in an earlier game, and it turned out to be the only tie in the position. Alright, I'm going to pause for a sec so I can eat a little more, because eating is important. Okay, I should actually look at Deli's move, though. And I think the point is that something like 6-2, 6-6, and 4... No, that doesn't... No, my idea just doesn't do anything. Ignore me. Alright, we'll be back. Okay, we got a move, and it does look winning. Yeah. The problem is you're down 6-4, and you need to grab a card. And the only places you can grab a card are 1, 2, and 6. You cannot grab a card in 6 without 6-2, 6-6 running at least even with you. You can grab a card from 2. 2 is the only square, and if you go in 1, then 4, 1, 7, 7 covers. So 2 is the only square you can go in that successfully grabs a card. The problem is 4, 1, 7, 7 then goes in 1, and when you go in 6, 6, 2, 6, 6 sweeps you. And if you try to sequence it to avoid that, you can, for instance, play 7, 7, 4, 2, and 9. Does that do anything? If 6, 2, 6, 6, and 6, then 4, 7, 6, 3, and 2 ties. If 4, 1, 7, 7, and 6, then 4, 7, 6, 3, and 2 ties. If Akiyama blocks 2, 6 ties. Akiyama can go 9, I suppose. 1, I suppose. But that's... Oh, no. Yeah, that does work. Okay. So if 7, 7, 4, 2, and 9, then I think 4, 1, 7, 7, 1 is the only tie. Notice it gives 6, 2, 6, 6 a plus and 2. And that if Deli plays 6, 2, 6, 6, and 2, it's comboed through 3 through 6. Alright, so this does look like Akiyama has evened up the score. And it does look like 3 was a pretty serious mistake. Deli has done well so far this match playing those kinds of moves, and one of them was the only save, and I would have lost that game from that position. But I think this was a serious mistake to even the match 1-1, and we will be going to game 3. Alright, we do see 7, 7, 4, 2, and 9. I think this was the best try. I think there is only one win against this move. But there is a win against this move. So Akiyama has already picked it up. And he will be evening the match. This could be a really disastrous round for people I'm close to. I guess Tezuka got through. And Deli's still a very good chance to win the matchup. But big win for Akiyama. He is firmly back in it. And we will be left with the open close, where anything can happen, and there is no plus. I think we'll end this video here. Or, after we've seen the final moves. 6-2, 6-6 is way too good here. Completely sweeps the board. If I was Deli, I'd probably walk into the combos. I'd play 6-2, 6-6, and 2. But you can't lose 9-1, which is a shame. I like to lose 9-1. So I guess 4-7, 6-3, and 2 is the way to lose 6-4. Yeah. A strange game. I don't fully understand what happened. And 6, 7, 4, 3, and 8 was stronger than I expected. While it was off, I did check how many ties there were against 6, 7, 4, 3, and 8. And 4, 7, 6, 3, and 4 was the only tie. And it was pretty, I think, clearly a tie, or at least I didn't, in quick skimming around with it, find where there was something to be all that worried about. But I'm sure something was seen. Everyone sees different things, and that means you can sometimes not understand things, but it can have had a very reasonable explanation. So they will be going to game 3. 4-7, 6-3, and 4 did tie, was the only tie, which means 6-7, 4-3 had a little more sting than I thought. But I think this was a situation where Deli was somewhat bitten by being someone who can find so much potential in different squares. Because even if I thought 4-7, 6-3, and 4 didn't work, I'd probably play it anyway, just because I wouldn't see anything else that I think could do anything. And Deli will always find more moves that he thinks can do something than I do, and he will really often be correct. But this was a spot where I think it hurt him a bit. All right.